Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Here we go. At UNBOSSED, I interview amazing women in Chicago. There is so much woman power in this city that I want to provide these women a platform to tell their story. Please connect with us and please consider supporting by sharing, liking, commenting the podcast. Tell all your Netflix friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. I hope you enjoy and welcome to the show. Dr. Suzet McKinney is a public health expert, media executive, thought leader, strategic thinker, and nationally recognized expert in emergency preparedness and response. As principal and director of life sciences for Sterling Bay, Dr. McKinney oversees relationships with the scientific, academic, corporate tech, and government sectors involved in the life sciences ecosystem. She also leads the strategy to expand Sterling Bay's footprint in life sciences nationwide. She previously served as CEO and executive director of the Illinois Medical District, where she managed a 24/7, 365 environment that included 560 acres of medical research facility, labs, a biotech business incubator, universities, raw land development areas, 4 hospitals, and more than 40 healthcare-related facilities. Within 2 years of leadership, Dr. McKinney accomplished a financial turnaround of the IMD, successfully retiring more than $40 million in debt. In 2020, Dr. McKinney was appointed by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker as operations lead for the state of Illinois' alternate care facilities, a network of alternate medical locations designed to decompress the hospital system during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to leading the IMD, Dr. McKinney served as the Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau of Public Health Preparedness and Emergency Response at the Chicago Department of Public Health, where she oversaw the emergency preparedness efforts for the department and coordinated those efforts within the larger spectrum of the City of Chicago public safety activities, in addition to overseeing the department's divisions of women and children's health. She also provided support to the U.S. Department of Defense Threat Reductions Agency, leading subject matter expertise in biological terrorism preparedness to the country of Poland. Previously, she served as the Senior Advisor for Public Health and Preparedness at the Torrey Group, where she provided strategic and analytical consulting services to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security BioWatch program. Dr. McKinney also serves on numerous boards and advisory committees and works in academia. Lastly, Dr. McKinney holds her doctorate degree from the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health with a focus on preparedness planning, leadership, and workforce development. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Biology from Brandeis University, where she was also a Howard U. Medical Institute Fellow. She received her Master of Public Health degree and certificates in Managed Care and Healthcare Administration from Benedictine University in Lisle, Illinois. Welcome, Dr. Suzet McKinney. Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. In today's episode, I have the pleasure to be talking to Dr. Suzet McKinney. She's Principal and Director of Life Sciences at Sterling Bay. Welcome, Suzet.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
I am super excited to have this conversation. You have a unique perspective on the life sciences and how you can develop communities through life science. But before we get into that, can you just give us a little bit of context about who you are? Where did you grow up? What was it like to be in the shoes of Suzet?
That's actually a very interesting question. So I guess I'll start with growing up. I am a native Chicagoan. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, specifically in the South Shore community. I went to high school at Whitney Young High School, which is on the city's west side. And, I left the city to go away to college, but right after I finished my undergraduate studies, I returned here to Chicago and immediately started working, really trying to, give back to the city that I love so much. So, I've visited many places, but primarily have lived my entire adult life here in Chicago.
Yeah, and I mean, you I think you're being modest. You have a degree in biology. You've been in science for your most of your education. You went to Harvard University for your for you know for in the public school of health. Tell me, how was it like to go from Chicago and getting all this like solid background in education, really, and the perspective perhaps of the South Side in the community where you grew up, and different other communities that you have encountered throughout your educational experiences.
Sure. So, I guess I'll start by saying, education has always been important in my life. That was something that my mother instilled in me from the very beginning. She enrolled me in a book club when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And the book club would mail books to our house. And I remember, being a young kid, literally being in kindergarten and asking my mother if I could go outside and play. And she would say, yes, you can go outside and play, but first read this book to me while I cook dinner. And so my mother would be at the stove cooking dinner, and I would sit at the table and I'd read the book that she handed me. And then she'd say, oh, that was such a great story. Read me another. And that would go on for 3 or 4 books. So, if that is any indication of who I am, like that was my basis, my foundation in education. My parents always demanded excellence. So, when I graduated from 8th grade as valedictorian of my class, my parents were very proud of me, but my mother's perspective was, good, that's what you're supposed to do. I expect nothing less. So I've always, found school and education to be, I'm just going to use the term easy because I can't think of another term in the moment to best describe what I'm thinking. But I never really had problems in school. It was like the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And when I got to high school at Whitney Young, that was the first time in my life when I wasn't the smartest kid in the class.
Wow.
So that started to open my eyes that no matter how smart you are, there's always someone else who's smarter, who's doing more, who is handling more than you are. So that was a great, sort of next educational stepping stone for me. I had always wanted to be a doctor, and so when I graduated from high school, I started at Howard University. I was a chemistry pre-med major, so I thought I was really doing it. I stayed at Howard for 2 years, and then I wound up, I was awarded a fellowship from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. They were trying to get undergraduate students interested in scientific research. And so the summer of, I guess it was 1993, I went to Brandeis University just outside Boston to do this fellowship. I was, 19, 20 years old, and I was thrown into a microbiology lab with a bunch of PhD students and postdocs. And they looked at me and they basically said, we don't give a shit that you're a kid. If you're going to be in this lab with us, you have to do your experiments the same way we do. You have to record your data. You have to analyze your data. You have to report on your data. And we don't want to hear any whining. So, what are you going to do with that? So, okay. So I just, I had to blend into my environment.
Yeah.
And so that was the environment. They had laid down the law, and I was the only undergrad in the lab, so I didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So did that, which led to the offer of being able to spend a semester at Brandeis. They offered me tons of money to study there that fall semester and continue my research. The organizers of the program said, oh, we were really impressed with your work. What they didn't know is that all those postdocs and PhDs had cornered me and laid down the law. But anyway, it was a great experience. I actually transferred at the end of that semester from Howard to Brandeis full-time, changed my major to biology,
Yeah.
still pre-med. And I will say that was the first time that school actually got hard.
Mm.
I'll just call it death by organic chemistry. It was the first time in my life that I feared that I might actually fail a course.
Wow.
And then I also had an instructor who she was basically like the female Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
You know, she was a very thin woman with a full head of snow white hair.
Why do they always have the crazy hair?
I don't, she had big, white, crazy hair. Like it was all over the place. Her name was Emily Dudek. And you walk into her lecture hall, and it was if you can just imagine a lecture hall, but with chalkboards around the entire perimeter of the room. But when you walked in, she had written out the notes for the course. And, you know, you get excited. Oh, great. The notes are written on the board. I don't have to, rush and write everything down. Well, not so much, because what she would do is walk the perimeter of the room as she lectured through each set of those notes. And when she reached the end, she would erase the chalkboard with her right hand, and she would write the second set of notes with her left hand simultaneously. So if you could just imagine a woman with big hair just going around, walking around in a circle, writing and erasing at the same time. It's very intimidating. But I will be honest, as a woman of color, that was also the first time in my life that I experienced any form of knowing and someone vocalizing that they did not appreciate my presence in the environment, and quite frankly, didn't want me in the environment.
Mm.
I had a fellow student blurt out in a calculus class because she didn't like it that the professor kept calling on me to answer questions. And I was answering them correctly, and she just blurted out in front of the class, "Oh my God, like, how did she get here anyway?" And the entire class froze. The students laughed. The professor froze. So I won't tell you what I said in report to her, but let's just say it was very quick-witted. It was very curt, and it got the job done. It demonstrated my point. So that was really interesting for me. But it taught me your presence will not always be wanted. And that's fine, because that's the way the world is, but you still have to show up and be you. You have to show up and be you, you have to do you, and you have to find the inner strength to keep going and to excel and be the best you can be despite what other people think about you.
I love that lesson. That is such a powerful lesson, even for me right now, as I'm thinking to my career, because being a woman in tech, for example, like I am underrepresented in so many spaces.
Sure.
So many times I'm the only woman. Even like most recent like social dynamics that have been happening, like always being camera on or always being camera ready and all these things, it really has put a strain on me. And like even those simpler things, it's really about showing up as who you are, and even when your way is different or you are different than the rest.
Exactly. I think that also requires a level of self-will, the ability to look inward at yourself and find the strength within yourself to be able to do that. I was speaking to a group of interns just 2 days ago, and they just wanted to hear about my journey, my career journey, and how I progressed through school and the amazing career that I've had so far, which, by the way, I'm nowhere near being done. And one of the young ladies asked me, she said, you've had such an amazing career, a non-traditional career path, and you've primarily worked in areas where women are underrepresented and minority women are even more underrepresented. Have you ever had a time where you felt imposter syndrome or that you didn't belong, and what did you do to overcome that? And I just said, the short answer to your question is no. I've never felt like I didn't belong or that I didn't deserve to be where I was. And I think part of the reason why I've never felt that is because that moment in that calculus class back at Brandeis, when that young woman blurted out, how did she get here? Okay, I guess I have to tell you what I said to her. When she blurted it out, and again, the professor froze and didn't say a word, never came to my defense. No one came to my defense. I said to her, well, on scholarship, how about you? Dad's money? And it was like, have you ever seen a movie where the main character in the movie, it freezes and they are left to their own thoughts?
Yeah.
That was the type of moment that I had sitting in that classroom. And so that was a lesson that I learned immediately. And I didn't say anything to that young lady that wasn't true. I was there on scholarship.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter was, most of my classmates were there because of money, family, wealth, that sort of thing.
Nepotism.
Yeah. So I said to the young intern the other day, no, I've never felt like I didn't belong or that I didn't deserve to be where I was. Number one, because I've worked hard to get to where I am. I still work hard. I often have colleagues ask me, why do I work so hard? Well, I don't know how else to do it. But then I said to her, even though I have never felt imposter syndrome, I don't negate the fact that many women struggle with that. And so if I'm talking to women that struggle with imposter syndrome or feelings of self-doubt, my advice to them is that you have to look inward, and you have to engage in activities that help you build up your own self-confidence and that your own inner strength. And I gave her examples. I said, some people write affirmations and post them on their walls and on their mirrors. Some people just recite those affirmations to themselves. Some people pray, some people give themselves pep talks. Whatever it is that you have to do, do it. Because as long as you are working hard to achieve your goals, you deserve to be anywhere and everywhere you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I want to leave space for that because that is so powerful to any man or women, actually, that don't feel like they belong or they feel like they don't deserve to be. That is just a false statement. And, take time, like Suzette said, or Dr. Suzette said, to really affirm on yourself and make sure that you know that you deserve to take space in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Your background in biology is extremely relevant to how are we going to get to the life sciences, right?
Okay.
And how you connected the dots, right?
Sure.
But before we jump into that connection of the dots there, tell us a little bit about your how your career in the medical field went. After you got your PhD and decided not to be a scientist in an office sense, but to be a scientist in a different way.
Sure. So I have to start with graduating from Brandeis. Brandeis is a school where the vast majority of its graduates go on to medical school or law school. So much so that the school would package everyone's medical school applications on their behalf.
Oh, wow.
And, I was really excited about that resource. But what I realized is that means we all look alike on paper. And I knew that there was no medical school anywhere that would take a bunch of students from the same university. I've always been a very strategic thinker. Honestly, I don't know where that came from. It's just an inherent ability that I have. And so I started thinking strategically about how to make myself stand apart from my peers who were also graduating with their science degrees and that pre-med designation. I had done an internship with a physician at Harvard Medical School, and he told me about his public health work and what he was studying and researching in public health. And that really opened my eyes to public health as a field that seeks to resolve health issues on a population scale as opposed to an individual scale, such as when a doctor meets individually with a patient. So I said, great, I want to be the best doctor I can. So I decided to come back here to Chicago, apply for graduate school. So I was accepted to Benedictine University to get my master's in public health. I also wanted to work in public health for 1 year after graduating with the master's, because I thought, if I have a biology degree from Brandeis, a master's in public health, and a year of work experience, there's no medical school that wouldn't want me, right? But I will tell you, timing is everything. One of the lessons that I've learned over the course of my career is to be open to opportunity, because you never know what the universe is going to send your way. And so my lens has always been, as long as it's not going to harm me, harm my family, and I can see either I'm going to be able to have a positive impact on others or even on my own family, then it's worth, exploring. So I finished the master's degree, immediately started looking for a job in public health. And I didn't really have a preference as to which area of public health, but I say timing is everything, because I finished that master's degree in June of 2001. 3 months later, 9/11 happened. And then the month after that, the anthrax attacks on New York City, Washington, D.C., and Florida. And so, to make a long story short, the job that I got was serving as the bioterrorism regional coordinator for the city of Chicago. I didn't even know what that meant, but it sounded good. It actually kind of sounded like my favorite TV show at the time, which was Alias, starring Jennifer Garner. So, she was like a undercover CIA agent posing as an undercover FBI agent. And she went on all these secret missions to, save the world. So I'm like, oh, I can do that. I can do it. So 1 year came and went very quickly. At the end of the year, I wasn't ready to go. I thought, I'm enjoying this work. I'm making an impact. I'm going to extend for a second year. Got to the end of the second year and felt like I could not pull myself away. So it was in that moment that I made the very difficult decision to turn away from my lifelong dream of being a doctor, a pediatrician, more specifically a neonatologist, a baby doctor. But that was a struggle for me because, I grew up in the era where, whatever your grandparents told you to do, that's what you did. And my grandmother told me she only wanted me to do two things in life: play the piano at her church and become a doctor. Well, I never played the piano at her church because my piano teacher died and I couldn't bear to take lessons with anybody else. So in my mind, I had to become a doctor no matter what. But I didn't know at the time how I was going to do that. But then I also decided that since I was turning my back on my lifelong dream of being a neonatologist, I had to make sure that I was a leader in my work.
You're excelling.
Yes. I looked at the leaders here in Chicago. I looked at the leaders in other big cities, New York City, LA, Washington, D.C., and I looked at the leaders on the national level at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. Every single person in leadership had, a PhD, a DRPH, an EDD, a PsyD. I was like, okay, I get it. Everybody has a D. I got to go get a D. So I applied to the University of Illinois at Chicago for my doctorate degree in public health and got accepted. And that I thought that I had to get the degree in order to be promoted into a leadership role. And that wasn't the case at all. What I will also say is that while I was studying for my doctorate degree, I was also working full time. So I I had the ability to apply what I was learning in school, that theory, in a practical sense in my job every single day. So I was catapulted into leadership before I finished the doctoral degree, and that really set the tone for my career and where it has come thus far. Eventually, I found myself leading the city of Chicago's public health, emergency preparedness, and hospital preparedness work. Deputy Commissioner for the City of Chicago's Department of Public Health. With that came the opportunity to lead a number of emergencies that our city's public safety infrastructure dealt with. And I led all of the ones that had a public health or medical consequence. So I was working closely with hospitals to make sure that they were prepared to take on a large surge of patients at once, and working with other public health officials to ensure residents and people in the community were safe. And I have to say, I led some really big efforts. Chicago's response to the 2010 Haiti earthquake, at least for our health department. Yeah. I also led our H1N1 operational response and our Ebola response in 2014 and 2015. So, but how I got to what...
Before we get to how you got there, but tell me, like, in these transitions,
sure,
how did you handle the transitions? And like, as somebody who is such a go-getter like you are, do you pitch yourself for the position? Do you let it happen? Did you have a mentor? How did you navigate the increase in responsibility and the promotions that came, with that?
I can honestly say, since I got my doctorate degree, and I finished my doctorate in 2009, I have never pitched myself for a role. Never. They've all come to me. So becoming deputy commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health, overseeing all of our preparedness work, I was very happy and content in the role that I was in. And the woman who was my immediate boss decided that she was leaving the organization. She had accepted a role to go and work for the Centers for Disease Control. And I remember the day like it was yesterday. I had a meeting on my calendar with her for, I don't know, something like 10 o'clock in the morning. And she called me the night before and said, I need to meet with you tomorrow morning. Can you be in my office at 7:30? And I'm like, we already have a meeting on the calendar for 10. She's like, no, I need to talk to you before that. I honestly thought like I had done something wrong. I was in trouble, fired. And, so all night I'm racking my brain like, what did I do to get fired? I haven't done anything wrong. So I go into her office that next morning, and, like her number 2 was there. I was like the number 3 in our program, our division. And she said, yeah, I needed to talk to you early because I wanted to let you know that I'm leaving. And then she pointed to the guy who was her number 2, and she said, and he's leaving too. And the health commissioner, who was her boss, she said, the health commissioner has already decided that he's appointing you into my role, and he's making the announcement at 9 a.m. I was like, what? So it wasn't something that I asked for or something that I pitched myself for. I was honored that the health commissioner saw me as the person who should step up to the plate next and lead. One thing about me that I think is just so characteristic of who I am as a person and as a professional, I always need to be challenged. If I'm not challenged, I'm bored. And if I'm bored, I'm just, I'm not going to give it my everything. So that was one role. And I stayed in that role for 7+ years. And It was when we had Ebola happen here in 2014 and 2015. When it ended, I thought to myself, oh my God, Ebola was that one threat that we always knew was out there. It existed in some remote country somewhere. It was never supposed to come to the United States. But then it did. I led our response to it. I survived the worst of the worst. What am I going to do now? And I will tell you, serving as deputy commissioner at the Chicago Department of Public Health was my dream job.
Nice.
You know,
dynamic, challenging.
Exactly. Dynamic, challenging. You know, it was very high profile, which I don't always enjoy. But I also had a national level profile, you know, serving on all sorts of boards and advisory committees for the CDC and the Department of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services. So it was great.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I was like, I can't stay here because I need to go on to the next challenge because the worst of the worst happened and I survived. And it was like,
I did that, and therefore now I have to go do something.
I have to go do a challenge. So, but in my brain, I was like, what could possibly be more challenging than this? And here's another day I remember like it was yesterday. I came to work one day. I went to my assistant's desk to get my calendar for the day. I picked it up and there was nothing on it. It was completely blank. And I said to her, what's this? The calendar's blank. She goes, I know. Isn't that great? You don't have any calls or meetings today. And I'm like, that's impossible. Because the way my schedule was, I had calls or meetings or travel or something. I was booked back to back every single day. And this particular day, I had nothing. And I argued her down, insisting that she had made some sort of mistake. I told her, you need to check your emails, check your voicemails. I'm sure I have a meeting. There was nothing. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'll clean my office. So I went into my office and I started cleaning and the phone rang. And it was a recruiter who was looking to hire. He was leading the search for the new CEO of the Illinois Medical District.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, no thanks. But I appreciate the call. He was like, hold on. What do you mean, no thanks? Do you understand what this role is? And I was like, no, not really. But, you know, I know what the district is. It's not something I see in my career path. So thank you again. I really appreciate the call, but, you know, I respectfully decline. And he refused to let me hang up the phone unless I agreed to come and meet with him in person. Eventually, I just got tired of talking to him, so I only agreed to get him off the phone. But then I went and I had the in-person meeting, and the more he talked, the more interested I became. So that was a moment where I was basically not following my own advice to explore any opportunity that will allow you to have impact and not harm you. And it nearly got away from me. So needless to say, after going through the process, I was hired as the CEO of the Illinois Medical District, which at the time I didn't realize the district had been in existence for 75 years. This was in 2015. So in the 75-year history of the Illinois Medical District, I was the first female CEO, the first person of color. Yep. The first CEO with a public health or healthcare background. Yeah. And at the time I was 42 years old, I was the youngest.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is some power right there.
Again, an example of how I didn't pitch myself. I was cleaning my office because I didn't know what else to do with myself that day. And the phone rang. And then I spent 5.5 years as CEO of the medical district and came to a meeting one day with Sterling Bay because I wanted to convince Sterling Bay to develop a life sciences building in the Illinois Medical District. Yep. So I brought one of my team members with me. We made this pitch to Sterling Bay. It was a great meeting. We walked away with a number of next steps. And I don't know, an hour or two later, they called me and asked me if I'd come back. So I came back 2 weeks after that. They offered me a job. I was shocked.
Okay.
Didn't see it coming.
I mean, I think that's awesome. Also, that hasn't been my experience. I've had to chase and really work for the jobs that I've had thus far, which maybe says something about me. I don't know. I'll probably reflect on that with my counselor.
I don't think that says anything about you at all. You know why? Because I believe that as women, we have to be our own best advocates.
Yeah.
And I think that, our individual paths are our individual paths, however the opportunities come along. And I just happen to believe that the way opportunities have come to me, very non-traditional, in fact, a little crazy. So sometimes I wonder, what is it about me that these things just come to me in such an odd way?
Yeah.
So I don't think it says anything about you at all.
But I would love to hear about your work ethic too, because I like you've talked about your work ethic and how you work hard, and I'm not saying this just for the audience, because I think like we should like idolize in some ways putting 160 hours a day a week. Like, I'm not saying that. I just want to learn about like what is it like to be to have your work ethic. How do you what are your key learnings that you use in every role to be successful at what you do? And not necessarily like from like, I work 60 hours a week type of it, but more like what are some strategic things that people can take on and say, like, one of the things that, I always have one-on-ones, or, what are some of the learnings that you have reproduced through time to really gain a successful role and being successful in your role?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is, I have so many mottos that I live by, but two of them in particular relate to my work and my work ethic. Mm-hmm. The first is go big or go home. And the second is get shit done.
I like that too.
Those are two mottos that I live by. But I would also say that who I am as a professional has very much been shaped by experiences that I've had. So very early on in my career, like it was during the time when I first got hired by the Chicago Department of Public Health, right after 9/11 as the bioterrorism regional coordinator. I learned that role really quickly. And so I would often come to work and finish all of my work assignments before the day was over. And so what I would do when I finished all of my work, I would go to my boss and I would say to him, hey, I finished, and not that it matters, but maybe it does. I will just say for the audience, my boss was a white man. I'd go to him and I would say, I'm done with all of my work for the day. Is there anything that you have that maybe you're not going to get to that I can help you with? And at first he would say, nope, there's nothing I need you to do. So, okay, fine. So then I just go back to my office and, create busy work for myself. But every day I kept going to him and asking him if he had anything he wanted me to do. Eventually, I think he just got tired of telling me no. So he started giving me pieces of his work, assignments that he had that he wasn't going to finish. I take it, I finish it, I bring it back. And that went on for about a year. And when he decided that he was going to leave the organization, his boss said to him, well, this is a critical role. I can't have it vacant. Is there anyone here who knows your job just as good as you or better? He was like, yeah, one person, Suzet.
Wow.
So I was asked to serve in his role on an interim basis.
Nice.
The lesson for me there was, always be, a hard worker. Just because you finish your work doesn't mean that, you can just sit back and relax. Me helping him, I believed, proved my value. And obviously it was a great boost to my ego. It made me feel great. But here was the defining moment. I was serving on an interim basis. When the hiring manager was finally able to post the position, to find someone permanent, I was like, well, I've been doing this job for 9 months. I'm not going to sit by and just let someone else come in and take it. So I applied for it. The hiring manager was a white woman. There was another executive who was also a white woman, who I later found out went to the hiring manager and said, I know you're considering Suzette for this role, but if I were you, I would not hire her. And the hiring manager said, well, why not? She's been doing the job for 9 months, and she's been doing an excellent job. And so the other woman, the woman executive, said, well, yeah, she's a good worker bee, but she's not a leader. Now, I didn't know that at first. I did get the job. I had way more education than what was necessary to do the job. I was already within the department. I had been filling in for 9 months. So I was qualified for the job. I got the job. And then later, the hiring manager told me this story. The lesson for me was, I don't care what someone else thinks about me. I will never put myself in a situation where someone else gets to dictate where my career goes or does not go. And that was the experience that sort of gave me this go big or go home work ethic. Because as I reflected on it, what I thought was, if the hiring manager had listened to that executive, I would have been pigeonholed into a lesser role than what I was qualified for, a lesser role than what I was capable of. Well, needless to say, getting into that new position, even though I had been doing it for 9 months, I worked my ass off. I did things that they didn't know were possible for us to do. And before I knew it, I was hired into that executive role that the woman who said I wasn't a leader. And so, that's really where my work ethic comes from. My grandmother would call it stubborn. That's what my grandmother would call it. And, in a sense, she would be right. Because I always say, the worst thing you can do to me is tell me that I can't do something. Then I'm just going to work really hard and do it, just to prove you wrong, which may not be the best reason, but that's sort of where it started.
Beautiful.
And, I just get a great deal of satisfaction out of achievement. Being able to say, ooh, that was a goal. And I worked hard and I accomplished it. Yeah. Similar, I'm a big list person. I have a to-do list for everything. I get the greatest satisfaction just being able to cross something off of my to-do list. And it's the same way when I'm working to achieve a goal. Beautiful. So that's how the work ethic was shaped.
I like it.
As I've gotten older, it's a little bit of a problem because sometimes I work too hard, I work too much, and I exhaust myself. But honestly, I don't know another way to do it. I just don't. I've tried, and it doesn't work. So I think it has just become who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that advice. I am listening eagerly to your advice on how to progress in career, because I feel like a lot of women, and I find myself in this situation, we've had to move out to move up, which is not necessarily something that a pattern that necessarily I want to continue recreating. I want to be able to figure out within an organization, even when there are those type of actors that are talking talking you down of a position, or how do you can convince your boss that perhaps never sees you as a competent person until you do the things that need to be done in order to see you that way, or change the light. Because what I find is that a lot of men in my industry are promoted by potential, and women are promoted only by experience. But it's a catch-22, because you don't get the opportunity, you don't get the experience, and therefore you never, it's kind of like you're always like running this hamster wheel. And I really love that advice of trying to like take off the plate something from your boss, or your manager, or even a skip level potentially, to make sure that they see you as the potential next.
Sure.
They have you in mind for the potential next step. Is that how have you handled it throughout your roles as well?
No, actually, I've had both situations. I've had that where, because I helped my boss with his work, he was able to see me as the potential next. But I've also had a situation where I had to move out in order to move up.
Yeah.
So, and I go back again to my work with the city of Chicago. I was a deputy commissioner. Well, at one point we got a new health commissioner.
Yeah.
And let's just say his culture was one, I'll put it this way, they don't do women and they don't do people of color. And so even though he did not have any familiarity with my area of expertise, bioterrorism, emergency preparedness and response, he didn't even really like that kind of stuff. But he was always critical of my work. And, all I could think was, what is he talking about? Like, the CDC is calling us to ask us to help them with the big problem that they're dealing with. How can he be critical of my work? Well, I never got the answer to that question. He was just critical.
Yeah.
And so, one can only take so much of your work being doubted and criticized, especially when you know that you are operating at the top of your game. So one day I went into his office and I just said, I have worked really hard here, both prior to you coming and since you've been here. But clearly there is something about my work that doesn't give you confidence in my ability. And, you have not made that a secret. So perhaps I should just step aside, and that way you can, put someone into the role that you have full confidence in. And I left. I went to Washington, D.C., and became a senior advisor to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
And DHS sent me back to Chicago to do some work in the very department that I had left. And I bumped into him in the hallway one day. I was scheduled to be there for a week. Second or third day, I bumped into him in the hallway, and he said, "Hey, would you come see me before you leave?" Sure. So I went to see him, and he said, "First of all, I need to apologize to you." He said, "Because I was critical of you. I was very harsh with you. It wasn't warranted." And he said, "And I want to admit something to you." He said, "I never realized how hard you worked, how much work you did, and how much stuff you shielded me from until you left." And I was shocked.
Wow.
One, that he realized it, but two, that he actually told me. I was very grateful that he told me, but I was shocked. And he said, "So I would really like for you to consider coming back." Well, of course I had to play hard to get. I think I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I want to give it a little more time. It had only been, a few months. So I finished out my work there that week, and I went back to Washington. And suddenly I wasn't enjoying the work in Washington anymore. I was like, darn it, I am going to have to call him back. Let's put my pride aside.
Yeah.
And I called him back, and of course he then had to play hardball with me. He said, "Well, I don't know, I have someone else in mind." And I said, "Okay, well, If it doesn't work out, please
Let
give
me
me a
know.
call. He called me the next day.
Oh, okay, good.
And maybe a month or so later, I returned to Chicago, went back to the department, to the exact role that I had had, and I have had a great relationship with him ever since.
Oh, well, I love that story actually. It's a redemption story. And I actually don't think there's, and I love the fact that you went back into his department. He first admitted obviously to the bias and the lack of awareness that he had around what you were doing. I But I really love that you guys got to work together afterwards, because sometimes this relationship never get completely resolved, and this was an opportunity to get it resolved.
I agree. Not only did we have the opportunity to work together,
Yeah.
but we developed a mutual respect for one another.
Yeah.
I respected his work, he respected my work, and he's not here in Chicago anymore, but we frequently connect on LinkedIn, and send messages. But that was a lesson for me, moving forward. Obviously, it was a lesson for him. You can't insert your personal biases onto someone's work.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be objective and give your teammates, and I believe as a leader, you have to see people working under you as teammates.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give them the opportunity to be who they are and to shine and to do a great job. You have to, a part of being a good leader is empowering the people that you're leading. And that's what I learned, in that situation. So,
beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Suzette, this conversation went a completely different way than what I thought it was going to be. It's been a great time chatting with you. We're at the top of the hour here. Sure. I would love for you to come back at some point in the near future to have a second part about life sciences and how your work within the life sciences really is impacting the community, because I think that's you're powerful there, and your work there is so strong as well, and the audience can really benefit from that. But I don't want to take much of your time right now.
Well, let me just say I would love to come back for a part 2. And it's for the exact reason that you just said. I think the life sciences are so powerful. Awesome. And I think there's such a significant impact that they can make on this city and in the lives of people living in the city. And I really want to make sure that I get that message out. So,
okay, perfect. But this has been incredible. I love your advice on career. I think a lot of men and women alike are going to benefit from hearing how you have navigated your work and your professional advancement. And I really think that's going to be an amazing message as well. Where can people find you, and what do you have going on now coming up?
Yeah, well, I'm working at Sterling Bay, obviously, but I have a speaking engagement coming up in September. It's actually on September 30th, being hosted by Clarion Construction. I will be participating on a panel called Resilient Women in Commercial Real Estate. And the panel will be focusing on the impacts of the pandemic on the female workforce. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, please just go to my LinkedIn page. You'll find it there. If not, check out Clarion Construction on LinkedIn. It's also on their page.
Amazing and beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an amazing conversation. I am super excited about part 2, awesome. And we will set that up soon.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye. Bye-bye.
There you have it. I hope you liked this episode, and please don't forget to share, like, comment on the podcast link. Tell all your networks and friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest at www.unbossed.io. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. You can find all this information on www.unbossed.io. See you next time. Oh, that was good.